Backup quarterbacks. They're typically subject to holding clipboards, running the scout team, and filling in for the starter when they get injured.
What do you think about the nickname you've acquired?
I've never called myself that. So.
Normally, fans groan at the sight of seeing the backups headed into the game because it usually means mediocre football or downright disaster. However, there's been numerous times throughout NFL history that a backup quarterback has stepped in and not only played well, but has been a big reason to the team's success. At the time of publishing this video, Colts fans are hoping that Phillip Rivers can save their season.
What are you waiting right now?
Right this second? I'm not sure, Greg. How about that? That's an honest answer.
In today's video, we will dive into the history of backup quarterbacks who saved their team's season. Now, keep in mind, this video is referring to players who were backups before the season began or weren't even on the team's roster to begin with. So, placeholder starters like Sam Darnold in Minnesota in 2024 doesn't count. Alright, with that said, let's dive into our first example.
Earl Morrall's first 12 years in professional football read like a travelogue of the United States.
And I'm just happy to be here, really. 13 years, 13 is supposed to be unlucky, but this has been the luckiest for me, I can say that.
In the final game of the 1968 preseason, the legendary Johnny Unitas tore muscles in his arm, which meant he was going to miss most of the season. This was a massive blow, considering Unitas was probably the best player in the league, coming off his third MVP season. The team had no choice but to turn to Earl Morrall. Entering his first season with the Colts and 13th overall, Morrall was a veteran who had been a journeyman starter and backup around the league. He did have some success in brief moments during his pro career, but replacing the legendary Unitas in this situation was borderline impossible. And yet, somehow, Morrall was on another planet in 1968. He completely dominated, leading the league in touchdowns and yards per completion on his way to winning league MVP. The Colts finished with a dominating 13-1 record, and I'm sure the other teams in the league were thinking, what the hell? Their MVP quarterback goes down and their backup plays at an MVP level? What kind of sorcery is this? Morrall continued to do his part in the playoffs, leading the team to back-to-back victories to reach the Super Bowl, where the Colts were massive favorites against the New York Jets. Unfortunately, this is where the Morrall magic vanished. After throwing 3 interceptions and completing just 6 of 17 passes, the coaches benched Morrall and threw in the recovering Unitas out of desperation. Unitas helped a little bit, but it wasn't enough to overcome a 16-point fourth quarter deficit as the Jets went on to win the Super Bowl. What's more unbelievable, a backup quarterback winning MVP or the Jets winning the Super Bowl? Probably the Jets, because we have seen other backup quarterbacks win MVP, but we have not seen the Jets win it at all since. Amazingly, Morrall's story only got crazier from here. He went back to serving as the team's backup the following year and stayed in Baltimore for a while before finding himself in Miami as the backup to Bob Griese in 1972. During that season, Griese went down with an injury in game number 5, which kept him out until late in the playoffs. Miami was 5-0 when Morrall took over, and over the next 9 games, he brought back that 1968 magic and won all 9 starts, leading Miami to a perfect regular season and finished as the runner-up for MVP. Morrall nearly pulled off a second MVP starting the season as a backup. That is ridiculous. In the postseason, he started the divisional round and AFC title game, both of which the team relied heavily on running the ball, and they won both those games, advancing to the Super Bowl. The team decided Bob Griese was ready to play again, and the Dolphins went on to win the big game. This meant that they finished as the only undefeated team in the history of the Super Bowl era. Morrall continued to serve as the team's backup for a few more years before retiring.
But first, Plunkett would hit an all-time low. He was cut by the 49ers and later joined the Raiders in an unaccustomed role as a backup.
In 1980, the legendary Kenny Stabler was traded from the Oakland Raiders after a pretty legendary decade in Oakland, which included an MVP season and a Super Bowl victory. The team had sent him to the Oilers straight up for quarterback Dan Pastorini, who unfortunately struggled once he got to Oakland. It's important to note here that the Raiders had been a spectacular team throughout the 70s, and expectations were extremely high. They had missed the playoffs in 78 and 79, just barely, which led to a change at quarterback. Through 4 games, Pastorini had struggled, and unfortunately, he did not get a chance to redeem himself after fracturing his leg versus the Chiefs in game number 5. Enter Jim Plunkett, who stepped in that day and he threw 5 interceptions in an embarrassing performance. Plunkett had been a struggling starting quarterback to begin his career before becoming the Raiders' backup in 1978. That 5 interception game led to an outcry for someone else to play quarterback, but the team stuck with Plunkett. I'm not sure how high the expectations were, but whatever they were, Plunkett went above and beyond. Immediately, the Raiders looked like a completely different team. They rattled off a bunch of victories in a row, including putting up 38, 45, and 33 in Plunkett's first 3 starts. They went on to finish the regular season 11-5, and Plunkett had been one of the great stories in the league that season, but he was just getting started. The Raiders would rattle off 4 straight playoff victories, and Plunkett completely dominated, leading all quarterbacks in playoff yards, touchdowns, and quarterback rating. The team went on to win the Super Bowl that year, and Plunkett was the game's MVP, putting up 261 yards and 3 touchdowns in a commanding 27-10 victory over the Eagles. Plunkett would remain the starter for the Raiders after that, continuing his success by winning another Super Bowl in 1983, before age caught up to him and he retired after the 1986 season. Now, the NFL season is nearing its end. We have a handful of weeks left until the playoffs, then a few weeks of postseason action, and then there's no more NFL football for months. So why not get out to a game while you still can, which you can do through today's video sponsor, SeatGeek. With over 28 million downloads, SeatGeek is the #1 rated ticketing app. There are more than 70,000 events listed on SeatGeek, including concerts, sports, festivals, and more. The NFL and college football playoffs are around the corner, and right now you can get World Cup tickets on SeatGeek. I've been to some awesome late season games in the past, like this Ravens playoff game back in 2023, which was an epic experience. I highly recommend. I love using SeatGeek because they make it simple, with each ticket rated on a scale from 1 to 10, so you know you're getting a good deal. Look for the green dots, green means good and red means bad. Plus, every ticket is backed by their buyer guarantee. And I got you guys. Use code KTO for $20 off tickets at SeatGeek. Make sure you click the link in the description to download the app and have the code automatically added to your account so you can use it later. Shout out to SeatGeek for the sponsor. Now, let's get back to the video.
He's not a guy who has 2 or 3 Mercedes, has a big hat, 74 girlfriends. He is intelligent. He knows what he wants to do later on in life.
In 1986, he became the Redskins' backup after 2 seasons in the USFL. Given a chance to start in 1987, he proved that there was still force in his arm and fire in his heart.
In 1987, the Washington Redskins were one of the top dogs in the NFL. They were coming off a 12-4 season where they had lost in the NFC Championship game. And in 1987, the team had another strong season, finishing 11-4, despite their starting quarterback Jay Schroeder being somewhat unpopular in the locker room. Specifically, there was an ongoing feud between Schroeder and backup quarterback Doug Williams. Williams said this about Schroeder's ego, quote, "I don't think there was a hat in America that could have fit his head." In week 1, Schroeder had separated his shoulder, and it nagged him all season, though he continued to play through it. However, the injury clearly affected his play, and entering the playoffs, the team decided to make the move to Doug Williams, the more popular player in the locker room. Williams, in his 2 starts that season, had gone 0-2. But despite that, he did outperform Schroeder, and this had been clear to the team. This decision to roll with the backup Williams proved to be a great decision. He helped the team win their divisional matchup on the road versus Chicago. Then he put together a game-winning drive in the NFC Championship game versus Minnesota. And to finish things off, Williams threw 4 touchdowns in a dominant Super Bowl victory over Denver. Williams became the first black quarterback to win a Super Bowl as the team's starting quarterback. And he also won the game's MVP. Pretty amazing stuff considering that he hadn't won an NFL start prior to that playoff run in over 5 years. He went on to start for Washington the following year, but injuries led to the team turning to Mark Rippon, and Doug Williams was out of the NFL after 1989.
Even when you're losing 35-3, I know as a quarterback, when I'm out there in the field, no matter what the score is, every play, you got to play as hard as you can, or you're really just going to get embarrassed.
The story of the 1990s Bills is one of amazing resilience and ultimately tragedy. They made it to 4 Super Bowls in a row, and they lost all 4. That's one of the most painful 4-year runs in any sport ever, considering that the ultimate goal is to win it all. But it's worth recognizing the incredible success that they experienced during that era, and specifically one playoff run in 1992 that was saved by backup quarterback Frank Reich. Reich had been a longtime backup to Jim Kelly in Buffalo, and Reich never threatened Kelly's starting job. Kelly was a player in the midst of a Hall of Fame career, and Reich was a backup who never started more than 3 games in a season during his career in Buffalo. Well, in 1992, the Bills were poised to make a 3rd straight run to the Super Bowl. However, Jim Kelly got injured in the final regular season game. Reich filled in for him, but it was to no avail. They got blown out by Houston 27-3. After the game, it was clear Kelly was going to miss at least a game or 2. Coincidentally, they were going to play Houston the following week, and with Reich leading the way, this game ended up looking a lot like their previous matchup at first. In fact, it was way worse. The Oilers took a commanding 35-3 lead in the second half. It was all but over, and it looked like it was time for the Bills to accept their defeat. But then, Frank Reich went nuclear. 4 unanswered touchdowns by Reich, and the Bills' offense on 4 consecutive drives brought them all the way back to take the lead. This completely stunned the Oilers, and the Bills would go on to win in overtime 41-38, marking the greatest comeback in NFL history at the time. The following week, Reich would lead the Bills to a commanding victory over the Steelers, and this secured Buffalo's spot in their 3rd straight AFC title game. By that point, Reich had done his duty, as Kelly was ready to return to the lineup. He did fill in once again for Kelly during the Super Bowl when they trailed 31-7, and he brought the team back within 2 scores, but it was too little too late, and they couldn't reproduce the same results like they saw against Houston. Despite the Super Bowl loss, that game versus Houston is truly one of the great single-game playoff storylines of all time. And clearly Reich had a knack for this, as he had done the same thing in college. While playing for Maryland, he came off the bench when his team trailed to Miami 31-0 at halftime. That's when Reich turned on the Jets and led the biggest comeback in NCAA history to defeat Miami 42-40.
We will rally around Kurt Warner, and we'll play good football.
In 1999, the St. Louis Rams were expected to be an afterthought. They had an over-under of 5.5 wins, which basically means they're going to be one of the worst teams in the NFL. Then, to make matters worse, Trent Green suffered a season-ending injury in the preseason. He was their starting quarterback, so that pretty much meant that the Rams' season was pretty much all but over, and they had to turn to their backup quarterback who had never started an NFL game, Kurt Warner. Warner began his pro career going undrafted in 1994, signing with the Packers, and getting released before the regular season began. He spent the year bagging groceries at a grocery store, later playing arena football for a few seasons. He eventually played in NFL Europe, and then finally landed a backup gig in St. Louis in 1998. Then, despite nobody thinking the Rams would even be an average team, Warner flat out dominated. He went on to lead the league in completion percentage, touchdowns, and he won NFL MVP as the Rams went 13-3.
Drives it, Bruce pulls away, he's got it, touchdown!
The only question that remained was, could Warner keep up this level of play in the postseason? Well, he threw 5 touchdowns in his playoff debut, going on to win that game. The Rams eked out a victory versus Tampa in the NFC title game. Then in the Super Bowl, Warner threw for over 400 yards and 2 touchdowns as they defeated the Titans in dramatic fashion. Warner went on to have a Hall of Fame career, putting together more great playoff runs with both the Rams and the Cardinals.
Another newcomer for the 2000 season was a 6th-round draft pick named Tom Brady.
In similar fashion to the 99 Rams, the 0-1 Patriots were not expected to be good. They were coming off a 5-11 season, and their over-under in 2001 was 6.5 wins. To make matters worse, they got off to an 0-2 start, and their starting quarterback suffered a serious injury that would knock him out for most of the season. Insert Tom Brady, the 6th-round backup quarterback. This guy had mostly been a 3rd stringer in New England since he was drafted in 2000, and at one point he was on the verge of getting cut. Now, it was his chance to prove himself, and man, did he deliver. The Patriots started winning games on the back of their tough defense, a strong run game, and Tom Brady orchestrating a solid game-managing pass attack that helped the Patriots finish 11-5 to secure a surprise playoff berth. But the Cinderella story looked like it was coming to a close when, in the divisional round, Brady fumbled late in the game due to a hit by Charles Woodson that would have ended the game, but instead, the tuck rule kept the game alive, and the Patriots somehow pulled out a victory that day.
Fumble. Or, in this case, tough rule. In this case.
Freeze it on that.
In this case, it's...
Freeze it on that. Did you hear him?
The following week, Brady actually got injured, and Drew Bledsoe had to come back in and help keep the Patriots' legendary season alive. They ended up defeating the Steelers and advancing to the Super Bowl. And because of Bledsoe's efforts, there was a quarterback controversy brewing going into the Super Bowl. Who was Belichick going to start? Well, he decided to roll with Brady, and the rest is history. Brady, although not very effective passing the ball most of the game, pulled out a big-time drive when it mattered most to set up the game-winning field goal. Brady became the starter in New England for a long time, and Bledsoe was traded to Buffalo.
Stuart Scott with you. Coming up, Sports Center, the GMC postgame report. We will break down Colin Kaepernick's breakout performance.
In 2012, the 49ers were a force throughout their first 9 games of the season, possessing a 6-2-1 record. They had been completely dominant on the defensive side, and pretty efficient on the offensive side, led by quarterback Alex Smith, who had posted one of the highest quarterback ratings in the NFL. But unfortunately, Smith suffered a concussion and had to leave the team's 9th game of the season. Insert Colin Kaepernick, the second-year quarterback out of Nevada who had not played a ton to that point in his career. But rather quickly, Cap was very impressive in a 32-7 blowout victory over the Bears. Following the game, head coach Jim Harbaugh said, quote, "We have 2 quarterbacks that have a hot hand." And beyond this quote, he didn't guarantee that Smith would get the starting job back when he was ready. This incited a quarterback controversy. While Smith had been efficient and led the league in completion percentage, Cap was just much more explosive and dynamic. The ceiling that he had was way higher than what Smith could do, and Harbaugh recognized this. Despite Smith being medically cleared and missing just 1 game, Cap maintained the starting job for the time being. It was going to be a week-to-week evaluation, and ultimately, Cap never gave the job back to Smith. In a 7-game run to end the regular season, Kaepernick was totally dominant, helping the Niners lock in the number 2 seed with an 11-4-1 record. Then in the postseason, he was on another level. Against the Packers, he not only passed for over 200 yards and 2 touchdowns, but he also had the greatest rushing performance by a quarterback in playoff history, with 181 yards on the ground and 2 rushing touchdowns in a 45-31 victory. The following week versus the Falcons, despite falling behind 24-14 on the road, Kaepernick helped orchestrate a comeback to win 28-24 to advance to the Super Bowl. Of course, in the Super Bowl, the Niners fell way behind, and the power outage happened. Then they stormed all the way back with an amazing effort by Cap and this offense. In the end, they fell just short, failing to convert on a 4th and goal with just under 2 minutes left to play. It was a heartbreaking way to end an otherwise incredible season by this team and their newfound superstar quarterback. Kaepernick would maintain the starting job in San Francisco through the 2016 season, and Alex Smith was traded following the Super Bowl loss to the Chiefs.
I'm absolutely ready. That's why I'm here. So I'm ready to go, prepare every day, work every day, so I'm ready to go, need be.
In 2017, the Philadelphia Eagles exploded onto the scene with their young, second-year quarterback, Carson Wentz. After a decent rookie season, Wentz was damn near the MVP frontrunner in his second year, as he threw 33 touchdowns to just 7 interceptions through 13 games, and he was leading the NFL in QBR. But sadly, while diving into the end zone in a game versus the Rams, Wentz tore his ACL, ending his season just weeks before the playoffs. This was a tragic blow to a team that looked like the favorite in the NFC. Enter backup Nick Foles. Back in 2013, he was a Pro Bowler with Chip Kelly, but he never recaptured that same success after that, and he was traded to the Rams, then to the Chiefs, and finally he landed back on the Eagles roster in 2017 to serve as the backup. Thrust into the starting role, Foles looked good, throwing 4 touchdowns versus the Giants in his first start, but it quickly faded as he struggled versus the Raiders. And then he had a horrific game against the Cowboys to end the regular season. Optimism was shaky at best entering the playoffs, despite this team finishing with a 13-3 record. But of course, that's when Nick Foles flipped a switch.
Down, flea flicker. Foles launches downfield. Smith, touchdown!
The Eagles grinded out a low-scoring victory against the Falcons in the divisional. Then in the NFC Championship, Foles and the Eagles took on the Vikings, led by a surprise of their own, Case Keenum. Keenum had been thrust into the starting role early in the season and had led the Vikings on an improbable run to that point, which included the Minneapolis Miracle the previous week. However, Foles and company absolutely dominated that day, as Foles threw for over 350 yards and 3 touchdowns in a 38-7 blowout victory. The Eagles had incredibly made it all the way to the Super Bowl with their backup quarterback. It was truly an amazing story. However, they now had to face Tom Brady and the mighty Patriots. This was going to be a much tougher task than what they had experienced to that point in the playoffs. Usually, Belichick completely cooks opposing quarterbacks in these types of matchups, and yet, Foles put up one of the most legendary performances we've ever seen in the big game. He threw for over 370 yards and 3 touchdowns through the air, and most notably on a critical 4th and goal just before halftime, Foles caught a touchdown on a play that became known as the Philly Special. It's one of the most iconic moments in NFL history. The game ended with the Patriots getting stunned 41-33, and Foles hoisting the Super Bowl trophy as the game's MVP. Following the Super Bowl, Philly never quite captured the same magic with either Wentz or Foles. They did win a playoff game the following year, but they were nowhere near as dominant. Foles was traded to Chicago in 2019, and the Eagles would never win another playoff game with Wentz as the starting quarterback. Also, Case Keenum landed himself a starting job in Denver after his great run in Minnesota, but things didn't go well.
Joe, did you hear the Flacco chants?
Yeah, I heard him a little bit, yeah.
What did you think?
Yeah, it's cool.
In 2023, the Cleveland Browns were putting together a bizarre yet impressive season. They had somehow made it to a 7-4 record despite 3 different starting quarterbacks, all of whom had not really been all that good. This team had been heavily carried by their defense, and cracks were beginning to show on that side of the ball. If they didn't get some decent quarterback play at the end of the season, well, it was going to be a wasted year. Enter Joe Flacco. Flacco had been an unsigned free agent throughout the 2023 season, hoping to get a phone call to play again. His training consisted of throwing to his kids at his house. It was going to take a desperate team to give this guy a call. And that's just what happened. Cleveland set up a meeting with Flacco, and long story short, they signed him with the intention of starting him in their upcoming game versus the Rams. Flacco was thrust onto the field, and as expected, it didn't go all that well. The dude was old and rusty, but the Browns had no other choice, so hey, at least they tried something. But then, out of nowhere, Flacco found the fountain of youth and began to dominate. Flacco went on to throw for over 300 yards in 4 straight games, all 4 of which the Browns went on to win. This was something Browns fans weren't used to seeing. Flacco had become a hero, as he helped the Browns clinch a playoff berth, which was only the second time they had made the playoffs in 20 years. Flacco went on to win Comeback Player of the Year for his ridiculous late season heroics. He had played so well that the team was able to rest him for their final regular season game. Considering the dysfunction that the Browns have experienced since their return to Cleveland, this is going to be remembered for a long time. Unfortunately, the wildcard matchup versus Houston did not go well, and Flacco was out of Cleveland the following season.
Phillip Rivers will be signing with the Indianapolis Colts to be leading the Colts into the playoffs and potentially to a Super Bowl.
Phillip Rivers signing with the Colts is shocking, but not completely unprecedented. Back in 1998, Steve DeBerg, at the age of 44, signed with the Falcons after being out of pro football for 5 years. He played in a handful of games and did pretty decent. Now granted, this situation with Rivers is a whole nother beast. He's signing mid-season, and the team has an absolutely brutal schedule to end the regular season. But hey, crazy things have happened in the past. I'll be cheering for something special to happen.
Nice for the Colts here, down 21-0. Rivers, good protection, airing it deep. He's got Johnson out there. Johnson!